All right, today we're going to dig into a company you've probably never heard of, but one whose products you literally rely on every single day. It's called Preformed Line Products, or PLPC, and it's quietly powering some of the world's most critical infrastructure. No, really. Just stop and think about it for a second. The light you just flipped on, the Wi-Fi you're using right now, all that data streaming to your phone, every bit of it depends on this enormous, complex physical network. And you know what? That network is going through a massive, historic transformation as we speak. See? All across the globe, the grids that deliver our energy and communications are being totally rebuilt, upgraded and strengthened for the 21st century. It's one of the biggest infrastructure projects of our generation, and most of it is happening completely out of sight. And let's be clear, we're not just talking about patching up a few potholes here. This is a fundamental upgrade to how our world works. We're talking about taking old, aging power grids and making them smarter, tougher. At the same time, we're building out this massive fiber optic backbone for our data-hungry future. This global upgrade is the backdrop for our entire story today. So you might be wondering, who's actually making the nuts and bolts for all this? Well, that brings us from that huge big picture view right down to the company at the center of this explainer. Let's meet the key player, Preformed Line Products. At its heart, PLPC is an industrial manufacturer. They make the super specialized, absolutely essential parts needed to build and maintain the networks we were just talking about. Their customers are the big utility companies, the major communications providers, basically all the people who are out there doing the actual physical work. And the parts they make are these unseen essentials. This isn't flashy consumer tech. We're talking about the critical little connectors that hold power lines together, or the tough protective cases for our fiber optic cables, or the insulators that manage all that electricity. And they're not stuck in the past either. They're moving into renewables, EV infrastructure, and even high-tech drone inspection services. And look, this isn't some hot new startup just jumping on a trend. PLPC was founded way back in 1947. They've been a major player in the electrical equipment world for decades, with a rock-solid reputation. Okay, so we know what they do, and we know they've been around forever. But the big question for any investor is, how is this hidden company actually doing? Financially. Let's take a look at the numbers. So the first number that just jumps off the page is this, a 21% year-over-year jump in net sales. I mean, in this economy, that is a huge leap. It's a really strong sign that all this demand for grid upgrades and new telecom networks is turning directly into massive sales for them. And it's not just about sales. The company's actual profitability is growing even faster. Their adjusted earnings per share, which is just a fancy way of looking at profit that smooths out some one-time quirks, shot up an incredible 36%. That tells you their core business is getting way more profitable. You can really see this momentum when you look at their quarterly sales. They hit over $178 million in just the third quarter of 2025 alone. Seeing a jump that sharp really drives home just how fast they've been growing lately. Now, taking a quick look at the stock itself, we see a market cap of about $1.37 billion. One key thing here is the beta, which is under 1. All that means is that the stock has tended to be a little less volatile than the broader market. The PE ratio is a bit on the higher side, which shows investors are pretty optimistic about its future. And to top it off, it also pays a small dividend. Those are some really impressive numbers, but what's actually behind them? And maybe more importantly, can it keep going? That brings us to the case for growth. Okay, so the whole story here is that PLPC is basically riding 3 massive waves right now. First, that grid modernization we talked about. Second, the huge build-out of telecom networks. Think fiber to the home and all those new data centers. And third, this is not just a US story. They're pushing hard to expand globally with new plants and smart acquisitions. And if you want a sign of confidence straight from the top, this is it. Late in 2025, they raised their dividend for the first time since they listed on NASDAQ. A company just doesn't do that unless its leadership feels very confident that the good times and strong cash flow are here to stay. But of course, no investment is a sure thing. There's never a story that's only good news. To get the full picture, we have to look at the potential challenges head on. So let's talk about the risks. What's really interesting is that some of the company's biggest opportunities have risks baked right into them. It's like 2 sides of the same coin. For example, expanding around the world is great for growth, right? But it costs a ton of money and opens you up to all kinds of currency swings.
And while having strong demand is fantastic, it also means you have to buy a lot more raw materials like steel and aluminum, which are facing rising costs and tariffs.
So, to boil it all down, there are really four key risks investors got to keep an eye on. Those ongoing cost pressures from raw materials, the fact that utility spending can be cyclical, the risk that their big expansion projects don't go perfectly, and, of course, they have to compete against some much, much bigger companies like Hubble and Eaton. So, we've seen the powerful growth story, and we've looked at the real risks. What does all of this mean for you as an investor? Let's bring it all together and get to the bottom line. So, who is this kind of company really for? Well, PLPC could be a pretty good fit for investors who want a piece of that big infrastructure boom, who like companies that dominate a specific niche, and who appreciate a growing dividend. But on the flip side, it's probably not the best choice for short-term traders, investors who get nervous about high spending, or anyone who needs a big dividend check right now. And that brings us to our final thought. As our world depends more and more on having perfect data and nonstop power, you have to wonder, is the biggest opportunity not in the flashy tech stocks everyone talks about, but in the essential industrial companies like this one, hidden in plain sight?